What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with Mort Jensen of Forbes fame, of Yahoo Sports fame, of the NBA podcast fame, and of OnlyFans celebrity. You all missed it. He changed his shirt before coming on right on camera. Don't worry, we filmed it. You could get that on his OnlyFans with a subscription, so go check that out. We're here with another playoff post-mortem. The Orlando Magic. We're kind of just bouncing around doing these as they happen, but it's fun to get into the big picture stuff because stuff with each series changes so much. For anyone who cares, Grant and I will have some previews, whichever we can get to, like once the series are set, we'll really dig into the second round and maybe some first round reactions. But we're here to talk about the Orlando Magic. Mort, how you feeling?
Doing well. Yes, and I can confirm that I was changing my shirt, and you had very, very big eyes. So I appreciate the flirtation. I that was a major compliment. Thank you.
I'm here to serve.
I know.
But I'm also here to serve some takes on Orlando, which is entering, I would say it's a fascinating offseason. So let's take a look here. Do you have any like impressions from their playoff series against the Celtics? Peyton Pritchard did say that they were the best defense that Boston has ever faced, which is certainly, to have him say that, and then Jalen Suggs wasn't
Right.
even playing, is pretty incredible.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I don't think anyone really doubted the defense even without Jalen. So like good on them for maintaining that, but it's still like what I took away from it is they're so far away offensively still to the point where that has to be addressed this offseason. But they have an identity, and that's probably the most important thing you can have as a young team. I think they competed. I think they gave them everything they could. And again, that's just such a good trait for a young team because we've seen it 1,000 times, Dan. Young teams get into the playoffs. They aren't really sure of themselves. They get a little passive. These guys are the exact opposite. They fight, they hustle, they claw, and they do everything they possibly can to get there. They never quit. So the mental makeup of this team is great. They just need more talent.
And I think before we'll get into trades, free agency targets, what they actually need, but this also kind of starts with not that people lay this at the feet of Paolo Banchero, but there seems to be just some division on how good of a player is he. Because, okay, he can score. He's pretty switchable defensively. He can rebound. Look at how balletic yet brutal he is on the ball. But then he's not super efficient. And he did shoot 44.5% from three against the Celtics. He seems like he has that Jimmy Butler gene in him where it seems like he's always shooting better from three in the playoffs from what we've seen thus far. He's extension eligible this summer. So let's go through the different scenarios. Before we even go through them, do we both just agree that he is getting the max?
Of course.
Right.
Even if he's not a great shooter, great efficiency player yet, he's 3 years in. Look at who he's playing with from a spacing perspective. Yeah, absolutely. You gamble on that upside and you give him a max.
And so I would agree with you. I'm a huge Paolo Banchero fan. I think that he's going to be an MVP candidate, like a top 5 MVP candidate one day, because I want to see him within a better spacing environment. If you go through like catch and shoot 3-point metrics, off ball gravity metrics, just general floor spacing metrics, you will see that Paolo Banchero's teammates reliably across the board ranked in like the 5th, the 4th, the 0th percentile. And so I think a lot of his shot difficulty and his efficiency struggles just come down to the spacing environment, which he works. And so the 5-year max at 25% would be $246.7 million. Would you agree that they're probably going to include the 30% language that could bring it up to $296 million?
I'm absolutely. Why wouldn't they?
They did it for Franz, so I don't know if they don't do it for Paolo. That would be fascinating. I don't know what that would say, but that would be super fascinating.
Right.
And I just, so now you do have like that impacts there. So it's not going to impact what they're making or excuse me, their cap sheet headed into this summer, but it does kind of impact their thinking this summer because now in 2026, you're going to have Franz in the second year of his max, Jalen Suggs in the second year of his extension, and then Paolo's max extension would kick in as well. And so you get into just like the cap stuff with them this summer. As of right now, if they kind of keep everybody, they're $11 million over the tax. They can duck it. They could waive and maybe re-sign Mo Wagner, who's non-guaranteed at 11. Gary Harris at 7.5 million. You waive them. You could try to re-sign them to cheaper deals. I will say, even if you expect them to duck the tax, accessing all or part of that non-taxpayer mid-level exception at 14.1 million, that seems like a stretch, right, for this team?
I would assume so. Like you have two, you said it. You have two guys entering major extensions. Like Franz is going to add 31 million to his total. Suggs is going to add like 26 or 25, 26 million to his total. Like that. Yeah, absolutely. You still have Concevious Cole Pope on the roster earning over 20 million. Like even with Jonathan Isaac declining in value or not declining in value, but declining in compensation level for 10 million, it just doesn't add up. Like you are looking at a very expensive team, which is why they need to do something this year.
Right. And I mean, you could, I guess, offload other salary to try and access the non-taxpayer mid. So you duck the tax and you get to use this tool on a free agent. But you need to be sure that that free agent is going to make a difference. At this point, if you were trying to move Contavious Caldwell Pope, and maybe if you're even trying to move Jonathan Isaac, I know that deal declines, but he just doesn't play. He's like a 12-minute per game player. And so you might have to attach something to that money. And if you're going to do that, I think you might as well take a swing on the trade market. And and you alluded to this. That's where any change, any significant change, insofar as they make any, is going to come on the trade market. They have all their own first round picks moving forward. They have Denver's first round pick this year. They have teams, will still want to take a look at Jet Howard. They have Tristan Da Silva. Anthony Black is super interesting as a trade asset. So they have a ton of assets. But what is tough for this roster is Franz, Paolo, and Suggs will be about 116 million plus in 2026. That's if Paolo doesn't get the 30% max, if he doesn't make All NBA or something. That's like 70% of the cap gone right there, and there's still other money on the books. If you want them to take a major swing, it's tough because if you start to throw in names that are on the books for 3 years, whatever, and they're a LaMelo Ball as an interest, your favorite player in the league, you can't, we're just past the point as we're in this CBA where, okay, well, like Suggs, Franz, and Paolo are not all going to be on the roster if you decide you want to trade for LaMelo Ball or if Jamal Murray becomes available. You might even, given Orlando's cap sheet history, I think you could argue that they might even be hard pressed to have two of such players on the roster. And I think that's the challenge for them is they need to get an offensive difference maker that doesn't necessarily force them to reorient their entire future, basically.
Right. And that's where things get problematic because there is a guy we both have, not necessarily earmarked for Orlando, but a guy who we think makes sense there in Kobe White. He right now is on a compensation level that makes a lot of sense. He'll be earning 12.8 million, I believe, next season. That's very manageable to trade for. But then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2026, meaning he will need a new deal. What's he going to end up in? 35 million himself, 30 million? What are we? I don't even know what the number is, but it's going to be substantially higher than 12.8. So even if you bring on a dude who is cheap right now, that doesn't mean he's going to be cheap in a year from now or 2 years from now. So they have so many moving parts, which is also partly why I was very low on the KCP contract last summer. I was very outspoken about that. I thought that was just a tremendous waste of money. I understood that it was one of those situations where, spend it or lose it. But then, frankly, you should have gotten more for that.
Or been more aggressive to use it on the trade market.
Correct.
That stuff is super valuable in those situations.
That was just such a bone. I know it was celebrated all around NBA, on online atmosphere. Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, that's so great, right up their alley." Seriously, what did he offer them this year that they didn't have already? Seriously.
I viewed it as more of a signal that they were going to take swings, and it ended up just being the only move that they made, which never should have been. He wasn't necessarily duplicative defensively. Sure. I mean, the Suggs injury, KCP ends up being super valuable for them. But even if he was making shots at the level he was in Denver, he was never bringing the volume of floor spacing or even the type of shot making and table setting that they needed, which before even getting into additional names, I think it's a multitude of things where it's you just want better floor spacers who can make shots off the dribble from beyond the arc, even if they're standstill guys at this point. But you also kind of I guess I'm asking you, how much value do you assign to the next player or the biggest addition they're making having to be if not a floor general, someone who can do a ton of initiation for others beyond Franz, beyond Paolo. We saw Jalen Suggs used in that role, so beyond Corey Joseph at this point.
Right. No, Major, it has to be. I just wrote about this over at Forbes. Like, it's now the experiment of having to, run everything through Paolo and Franz. That has been explored. Clearly, there's a need for something else. And look, it isn't helping that Franz Wagner currently is reworking his entire jump shot. I don't even know what the hell he's trying to do right now. He's pushing instead of shooting right now, which is very concerning, especially because Paolo as well is, not a great 3-point shooter. He's like fine. Like, there's potential there in terms of
he's
his
all
jump shot.
time in the playoffs. He's shooting like
Right.
40-something% in the playoffs for his career. I'll have to check that.
Look, that's great, and that's a good sign. I'm gonna need to see something a little bit more sustainable. But yeah, my point is, now's the time to go in for like a playmaker. I just want to call him, and yeah, it should be a guard. I think it should be a guard, because if you run everything through your forwards and you have guards who can't space the floor off the catch or create something on their own accord, you are going to get absolutely brutally slaughtered in the playoffs, regardless of how good a defense you have. Like, look, Nico Harrison spent how many months saying defense wins championships? We have the Orlando Magic here. No, they don't. You need more than that. Like, yeah, is a good defense necessary to win a championship? Absolutely. I'm not arguing otherwise. But if you think you can win a championship in today's NBA primarily off the basis of having an elite defense, you're out of your goddamn mind.
What level and just right before we get into the specific names, what level of player does that need to be, though? Because you already mentioned Kobe White, but like dealing in just archetypes rather than specific names for a moment, does this player need to be like a fringe all-star, or could you get away with, let's call them the equivalent of a mid-level guy who can come in, hit open shots, make some passes? Is this team good enough to say, we don't need to go the blockbuster route? Like, we just sort of need to futz and fiddle, not necessarily on the margins, but in the middle of our pecking order.
What you're essentially asking me is it necessary for Orlando to go after a Kobe White type instead of just going for a D'Angelo Russell type? And you know where I'm going to land on that one.
I think when the other name is D'Angelo Russell, it's not hard to land where you're going to land.
Well, I mean, look, guys who sign for exceptions, they're going to have significant warts. Like, let's just be real. That is a case, and you have to then have your warts be so insignificant specifically to the structure of the Magic that they can hide all those weaknesses. But like, who's that guy? Who is that guy who it might be able to, you can cover up defensively and then it's just perfect. Then he's just fits in like, hand in glove. I don't know who that player is.
I guess I was going to ask, so if they could do something like this, and I don't view this as a perfect solution, but it's sort of a stopgap when you're looking at their payroll. Let's say you can get off the KCP deal, take some compensation, but New Orleans is rebuilding, and you can get the next year of CJ McCollum, who does a lot of the stuff they need, and I don't think he's received enough credit for the way that he's upped his 3-point volume in New Orleans. Does a move like that nudge the needle in the right direction, or they need to be thinking even bigger?
No, see, that's a move that does nudge in the right direction, because I also think he's more than an exception guy, right? Like, I know he's older, but his game isn't exception worthy. It's more than that. It's higher than exception worthy. So that would be a guy who absolutely pushes them in the right direction. I don't love the age timeline personally, but in terms of the archetype of player, hell yes. I mean, look, in many ways, you can argue that Kobe White is just basically the next generation of CJ McCollum. They're pretty similar in the sense that both were kind of shooting guards, then became kind of ones. They're still really combos, can shoot a bit, but can also be a bit inconsistent. There are a lot of similarities there, and that's why White is always on my list, but McCollum is a good shout. Yes, he would absolutely fix an absolute shit ton of what they're going through right now.
And he is, because he's older than Kobe White, where it's Kobe White's so cheap now in terms of just the raw dollars, but he's going to cost more in his next deal. CJ McCollum is kind of the opposite. You need to come up with the money matching now. That's not a problem for Orlando, but he's not going to be making $30+ million in his next deal.
Right. So that's one more year. and then he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026, unless of course he signs an extension, which he can, which doesn't have to be higher than his current salary. So like, what could be an interesting contract for CJ McCollum? Like
2 and
what?
40? Is that too
Oh, that
much?
I
Too little?
like that. No, that. I feel like that's fair, right? Because at that point he'll be 34. He'll still be effective, but like on the downslope of his career, 240. That's Vooch, I think, got like 360, so that kind of aligns with the 20 million a year kind of
Mhm.
route. I think that's fair. That would be a good deal for Orlando too, because it's very manageable. 20 million is in a couple of years. That's the non-tax MLE anyway.
And I guess the other thing is you sort of mentioned that you would want to see them trade for or acquire a different type of center.
Yeah.
How
Well,
high or how big of a swing are you making on that type of a resource?
see, that's the thing, because that center has to fit Paolo. And I'm mentioning Paolo specifically, not Franz, because that's still their number one guy. Paolo is the guy they have to build around as like the first thought. Whenever they do.
Thank you for
Yeah,
saying that. I think, by the way, I think Franz is about as good as you can be offensively with the type of jumper that he has right now.
right.
But I thought people were really getting over their skis by having is he more important to the Magic than Paolo
No,
Banchero? Yeah.
no, no. And I'm saying that as a Euro guy, like, by the way. I mean, look, I like Franz. I actually do. I like him a great deal. But if like we were talking about wards, he has a lot of them.
Mhm.
And like Paolo to me projects also not only with the higher ceiling, he also projects as the safer bet moving forward. Just be honest about it. He has to be top of mind when you do make roster alterations. So for a center to fit alongside Paolo, what type of center do you need? Well, given these shortcomings from a spacing perspective between Paolo and Franz, who both of whom are going to play 34 minutes per game. Let me just double check. Yeah, 34 minutes per game, both of them. They're going to be on the court a lot. You're going to need someone who can stretch. I don't think he's available, but I would love a Khalil Ware as well alongside one of those two guys. What is it going to take to get him? Presumably a whole lot. That's the type of player I would go for.
And I wouldn't go. I agree with the archetype. I wouldn't go for Khalil Ware because I do think this team needs to stop trafficking in the development of the solutions. And Khalil
That's
Ware's
fair.
spacing is not bankable. I'd rather see them. I mean, those players are expensive. We mentioned Naz Reid. Probably the price point is too high. And even if you could make them like, let's say they could do a sign and trade
Right.
for what you have to give up, does it make sense? Like he's not solving your playmaking issue as your
Correct.
gap. So to give up pick resources to get him is tough. If it only costs contracts, then yeah, sure. Kristaps Porzingis could be interesting if Boston is looking to cut costs and you're roping in different teams. He's a pretty good fit next to Paolo.
Oh, he would be the best fit. I just kind of labeled him as ungettable in this specific scenario. But if he's not, yeah, I'm all ears. That would be an amazing fit.
What do you think about? He's a free agent, and he was played off the court against the Pacers. Brook Lopez.
Can he still walk after the summer?
I don't know. He goes to Disney World a lot, so you might get too many steps in, and his legs could be sore.
Right. I mean, look, another year with
Would that be like the most ground bound front court in the end, like Paolo and Brook Lopez?
It might be. And look, there's some worth in that. I'm not counting that down. Look, he'll have games like if Brook Lopez ends up in Orlando, he will have games where we're like, oh, we see the vision here. But he's so old. He's like, I'm literally only 2 years older than to the date, even April 1st. Like 37 and going out there, and then he'll be 38 come playoff time next year. That's a tall order. Tall order.
What about his teammate Bobby Portis? This team has probably the ability to insulate him defensively. You know what? This team really needs like peak Maxi Kleba. That's like a half decade ago.
That'd be fun. Yeah, no, that's a good one. Like Bobby, I'm not in on for this roster specifically because he's almost exclusively a 4 now. Like I know he plays the center spot here and there, but he's so much better. It
puts a lot on Paolo. Yeah, if the front court is him and Paolo. And by the way, I still love Wendell Carter Jr. It's just they need someone. You want to open up as much room as possible for Franz and Paolo, and they need someone who's a better spot up shooter than Wendell Carter Jr. right now.
I have a tricky one.
Karl Anthony Towns, I'm sold.
No, no. Bringing back Vooch.
Oh man.
Well, I mean, look, when you think about it, playmaking, solid ass rebounding, and look, that's probably the one knock I have on Paolo is that he doesn't rebound enough. He like Vooch will come in and rebound the heck out of the ball. We saw this year that he's so much better as like a trailing 3-point shooter than as someone who plays slowly in the half court with Suggs back. If you also get a new lead guard in there, maybe you can dial up the offense. We saw that in the first few games of this season before the injuries that they were really dialing up the 3-point shots and the pace. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's something there. He's familiar with Orlando. He still loves the organization. The organization still loves him. They didn't leave each other in a bad way. Like, I wouldn't hate that as a stopgap option until you find something more sustainable. And look, if there's a team that can hide his defensive deficiencies, it's them.
Do you know who'd be fun? And he would have to be a cost-cutting casualty. Otherwise, I don't know why he would leave his team. Al Horford works here.
Oh, well, Al Horford works practically everywhere.
Hey, didn't he go to Florida? So this be like a reunion. Maybe he wants to come back.
Sign up Joakim Noah as well and Corey Brewer. Get the band bets good.
So we have a list, and I didn't put every name that we might talk about, but a list of prospective trade targets that the Magic could go after. Let's just tackle them one by one, and then you can add on there. Yeah. LaMelo Ball is, for me, before you take the talking stick, I would love LaMelo Ball on this team. I think he would be sensational, but we did just talk about, all right, I guess you are giving up Jalen Suggs in any permutation of that deal, but now you've decided, oh, it's LaMelo, it's Banchero, it's Franz, and like that's sort of it in terms of the big money. Now they're all would be on their fund maxes, so it's more workable than whatever Phoenix was trying to do, but it really does thin out your margin for error. And if you're going to do that, even I'll say this as a LaMelo apologist, you want someone who's more bankable. And I would say, like, if they were going to go all out, I would, and this isn't a hot take, but it's like, then go for Devin Booker. Don't go and like figure out the math with that rather than trying to figure out the math for LaMelo, especially given his injury history.
And the injury history is why I'm just like, no, they've already had too much of an injury history with Jalen Suggs, I think. Yeah. So like to downgrade from that situation from a pure availability perspective, it's just, to me, it's nonsense. A complete non-starter.
Oh, so it's not a non-starter for me. I'm going to be like, I want to know what the pick equity is going, because he's not like, he makes more than Jalen Suggs, but it's not astronomically more. I think what would give me pause is, okay, how many draft picks does Charlotte want? But also, you mentioned the availability with LaMelo. Mm-hmm. He has not defended well, even though he has the tools to do so. This team can insulate him and maybe makes his job easy enough to where he, like, if he's imagine him gambling for turnovers on this team. So I would be so intrigued, but I would have a hard line on the opportunity cost to get him because of the injuries. And just, again, because you have to position yourself to be able to make other moves after this. And so you can't just empty your draft clip in addition to taking on another fun max salary.
The fact that you want to add draft picks to an outgoing package that includes Jalen Suggs for LaMelo Ball.
I just
tasted my lunch again, Dan.
Look, maybe history will be written and you'll come out right on that, but I think LaMelo Ball checks a lot more anomalous boxes than Jalen Suggs does as a basketball player. When you're looking at the off-the-dribble shot making, the vision is transcendent. I think in a better situation, I wouldn't even say a better situation because I think Charlotte does have good people in place up top right now. But like, there's a lot. This would be, you plug him on this year's Orlando Magic team, and they are by far and away the best group of players he's ever taken the floor with, and it's not even close.
That is true for about 17 games. That'd be amazing. And then he won't be able to play for the rest of the year. Yeah.
Would you, let's just say he becomes available, and we did talk about all the challenges involved of adding an expensive player. Should Orlando investigate the Devin Booker stuff, or is that just if you want Franz? Would Franz be a non-starter in a Devin Booker trade for you, as opposed to Suggs?
See, I'm actually open to moving Franz. I am. I know that sounds sacrilegious for Magic fans, but I'm open to it. The three, even before he started reworking it, was never that good. And you need that shot if you're him. Like, you really do, especially if you're playing alongside Paolo. Like, even Jalen is not the best natural shooter. So, yeah, I would be open. And it's Devin Booker, man. Like, yeah, obviously
And
the issue I would have
and
there is who starts at the one. Who's the lead guard there?
well, do you think if you have him and Paolo, you could find a one, but do you think if you have Devin Booker and Paolo that you need, like, doesn't
Yeah,
that kind of change the scope of who your one can be
nope,
or no?
no,
No?
no, no. So
I
here's the
disagree.
thing. Yeah, I that's fair. Here's my take on it. We've seen Devin Booker try to be pigeonholed into, okay, you're going to be the default playmaker. We've also seen Orlando try to run their offense through alternate means than, traditional point guard is a little bit of a tiring way to describe it, but I think it fits here. I'm just out on that. Like, it's time for Book to be freed up as a scorer far more. It's time for Paolo also to be freed up more as a scorer. Like, yes, should there be interplay between them? Absolutely, of course. And can Book run several pick and rolls every single game? Yes. I still think they need a real ass floor leader who can set all those guys up.
Right, but if you're getting and I think I agree to some extent with that because if you have like Devin Booker this year didn't have Paolo Banchero didn't have Devin Booker.
Right.
And so, but even if you're saying they need a one right now, like that's the difference between saying they need a Kobe White or they need a Tyus Jones or so like someone who could just come in cheaper and organize things.
See, it's funny because obviously the Suns sucked and they did have both Devin Booker and Tyus Jones, but I'm not necessarily out on that pairing whatsoever under different circumstances. Like, if Book ended up in Orlando somehow and Tyus followed suit, I'd be into it.
Booker has 3 years and $171.2 million left on it. So
Yeah, and it's not happening.
if you're not giving up for no, I mean if he wanted out, I think we all
Right.
agree it'd be you contact Houston first. We all know that, but that would be a fun name. Another name that'd be interesting if the Heat were blowing things up. He's kind of cheap relative to how the
Yeah.
league is going.
Yes, he is.
Tyler Hero,
Yeah.
2 years and $64 million. How would you feel about that?
Much better playmaker this year. I think he took a real step up in that department. Is it enough to like become the primary perimeter initiator? Not sure. Again, I feel like going for shooting guards might not be the best angle to this. I do feel as though you need to go traditional ones, but I wouldn't hate it because, again, as you pointed out, the compensation level is fairly modest. He's obviously improving. He's always taken some sort of improvement leap. By the way, why is it that everyone still pegs him as like a future six man? Is it just because he shoots a lot? I've seen so much of this over the past like 48 hours.
Well, they were
Why?
mad because he said he needed Jimmy Butler to win or something, which I take is more of a shot at Bam Adebayo than Tyler Hero. But
No, but I'm like, what are we doing here? He's obviously a starter. I mean, I'm interested, but again, does his archetype, fix a lot of these things in Orlando? Maybe. I'm not ruling it out, but when push comes to shove in the playoffs, and you're gonna need someone to handle the ball, protect the ball, create high percentage looks in very tight half court offense executions. Is it Tyler Hero and Paolo Banchero you trust to facilitate those, to create those? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm kind of leaning no.
well, then I guess that gets interesting because then names like Zach Levine, Malik Monk, Anthony Simons, 1 year, 27 point. Everyone's been trying to send Anthony Simons to the Magic for like 3 years now.
Yep.
And I mean, even for what you're describing, Kobe White is not that.
Right, but he's cheaper for now, and you can get him for cheaper as well because the Bulls, well, they're probably going to lose him, right? They can't extend him, so the price tag is why I'm interested in Kobe here. Because you had to give up a ton for Book, you have to give up a ton for Hero, you have to give up a ton also for like the good traditional ones out there. Kobe White is in a situation where the Bulls can't extend him. We also know they're horrible negotiators, and that's not even a joke. That we've seen it. I mean, that's a thing. So like, there's a world out there where Orlando can go in, sort of fleece them a little bit in the trade market to get them. I think that carries some weight, and also because it's so easy to match salary. I agree with you that Kobe doesn't fit, the narrative of like a Tyus Jones archetype, for example. Absolutely. I will say he's gotten better as a playmaker. I will say he's gotten better as a defender too, for that matter. And then we're kind of seeing when he's like the primary guard, he levels up, and that's like a consistent pattern. I don't know. I'd be willing to roll the dice on it because I don't think you relinquish all that much to go get him.
Do you think there a lot of their or any or how many of their offensive issues do you think could be resolved if, let's say, that the trade for the type of floor general or guard that you're talking about isn't out there? Should they be investigating like the Norm Powell's? He's on an expiring contract at 20 million. Cam Johnson deal is declining, 2 years, 43 million. Even if Michael Porter Jr. becomes available in Denver for some reason, he's got 2 years and 79 million is a lot. Cam Johnson's the name that I kind of stick on, where it's if you told me that wasn't the only move, I don't know that I would love it. But like that, just to get someone in there who can open up the floor for what ball handlers they have in place right now, and doesn't maybe it breaks some of the bank of your asset stash, but it's not going to break the bank financially for you. That'd be a name if I'm them that I'd at least be interested in.
I love Cam Johnson, and I understand that we are in an age where positionless basketball is a thing, but where the hell will he play alongside Franz and Paolo? Like,
Like you
he's
could
not a
just play the
two.
three of them together. Like sometimes maybe Paolo's the big, but I think if you have
Yeah.
Wendell Carter Jr. as a center, if you bring in another center, I think that could, like we've just seen it. Like we've seen the Magic
Yeah.
play ultra huge enough for me to believe that something like that could work.
I guess, but maybe we should ask the question, like, is that necessarily the way forward?
No, I said as
Putting
the move.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the way
Right,
forward.
exactly. And Norman Powell, like, first and foremost, fuck you for getting me to criticize Norman Powell right now because I have to. He's not a ball handler. Like, I love him as a player. I absolutely love him, but he's in the right role as he is with the Clippers right now. That
Right, but what did I
role,
say about him handling the ball? I said if they weren't going to get that
if
type
they
of player.
weren't going to get that, but like where again, then why bother? What like he's just gonna play off of everyone else. Like what
Well,
again,
he's
they
got
don't
some he's got straight line juice to him. We saw he's got
he
some self
does.
creation juice this year.
He
So
does,
you're
but
saying
he's
you're blaming me for criticizing
yes,
Norman Powell, but you're actually levying unjust criticism at Norman Powell. So that's on
I
you.
am. Look, that's why look, he doesn't solve their issues. That's the thing. They need someone to be able to handle the ball, get into the teeth of defense, break guys down. Again, Norman Powell is great as like the third guy on a team, like the third scorer, where everything kind of aligns, but it has to be the right setting. If Paolo and Franz are the main, playmakers, I hate Norman Powell right there. I don't think that's the right approach because I don't think they are good enough passers. Like we compliment Paolo and Franz for their playmaking, and yes, but it's in the context of the positions that they play. Like, let's be real, they're not elite playmakers, and I think to Norman Powell's, well, how do you put this? I think he's benefited greatly from playing next to James.
How do you feel about I do think you're kind of like glomming on to the idea of like guy needs to be just like a traditional point guard. And I feel
I
like
might.
Paolo, and if you're going to keep Franz, give you more optionality. Like Anthony Simons to me, I don't know if he'd be
Mhm.
my favorite target, but that's someone who could come in and because he already has some of the secondary playmaking, can get into teeth of defenses and then just
Right.
hit threes. I don't like he's the furthest thing from a traditional point guard, but I think that would be in terms of a single acquisition, realistic single acquisition, that comes like pretty close to papering over a bunch of their issues.
Right. Well, so it might not have to be a traditional point guard. It can be a combo. I think with Powell though, he's not even a combo. Like he is a straight on two. He knows who he is, right? He's more of an off ball guy, cutting. Like yeah, you're absolutely right. The straight line drives, he's got those. He's never been herky jerky, and I think Kobe White, Anthony Simons, Colin Sexton, who's on the list as well, those guys can at least get defenses off like off rhythm. So
Mhm.
there are
That's fair.
avenues there they can get to. Even hell, like I don't support this, but like Zach LaVine is also that dude. He can also bend defenses in many ways. But
If he was
again, primarily,
cheaper, if he
yeah,
wasn't making so much, I think he'd be a
he'd be
really good
elite.
fit too.
Yeah, he'd be a great fit. But at the end of the day, you need someone at the point or at the lead guard. I don't think it sucks. I don't think it's Powell. I don't think it's Ron. If Orlando goes into next season with those three guys and no one else and says, "All right, those three guys are our primary playmakers," look, they're going to be in for a world of hurt offensively.
Any other names that you want to discuss or add to the list? There was some
I,
Jamal Murray like
right,
speculation. That's again, you run into he just signed a max extension. I really
right.
can't see like the playoffs. I don't know what would have to happen. From he just had a 40 burger after we're recording this. I just don't know what would have to happen for the Nuggets to want to break up the Jamal Murray Nikola Jokic duo.
I'm glad you didn't add Trae Young to that list because, again, the salary concerns there. But, he's been brought up a ton, and I get why. High volume.
This year's version of him would probably be a better because he wasn't so ball dominant, but
Yep.
I don't want someone, if I'm the Magic in here, who is going to be, you want them to be able to play off the ball more than we've seen Trae Young ever play off the ball.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. He's not the greatest spot up shooter. And I think that's the challenge because the archetype that we're kind of trying to bring into Orlando, either he's not available or he doesn't exist. That's the thing. Like, who is that guy who can take over like the tier 1 playmaking, but also shoot off the ball? Look, the only guy that comes to mind is Steph. And that's like unrealistic for Dame too. Yeah, sorry, that's true. Dame too.
What also worries me, I don't think they would do this, but it'd be funny if they actually make like an ultra big swing. But with the way that this front office like looks at things, it ends up being John Morant. We're just like, oh, we're gonna go with the athleticism rather than prioritizing the shooting here.
I would hate that. I would hate that.
Oh, I would hate it too. I want to make that. I'm not advocating for it, but it'd be funny if everyone's been pushing the Magic to. We're not even saying they need to make a blockbuster, but I think a lot of people just want to see them make this huge splash.
Right.
It would be hilarious if they do, and then it's just like so counterintuitive to what they need.
Yeah.
Now, we did go over their cap situation, which is a little bit sticky. So if you're looking at free agents, you're probably looking at sign and trades, or can you access the non-taxpayer mid-level? You'd have to clear some money to do that.
Right.
Any names on the market that like the list we have here, and I think we go, there's Malik Beasley, Malcolm Brogdon, Ty Jerome, Tyus Jones, Chris Paul, Duncan Robinson has an ETO, D'Angelo Russell, Mort already mentioned him, Dennis Schroeder, and then Fred VanVleet has a team option. I like Fred VanVleet a lot for what he could do off the ball, but I think they probably need, if you're going to go that route, like you probably want someone who's a better, just like you said with Norman Powell, it's not creating advantages for others. Fred VanVleet is not as limited in that respect, but he's pretty limited for a point guard.
So your second name on that list is interesting, pending health. Malcolm Brogdon, again, that's the big thing with him, with health, right? But in an optimal world where he's healthy just for 60 games, he would be such a perfect fit there because he actually does many of the things that we're talking about: off ball, on ball, defense, can work himself into virtually every lineup. I genuinely believe that if Malcolm Brogdon had stayed more healthy over the course of his career, he'd been the shooting guard version of Al Horford, just in terms of how he can bend himself into so many different positions. That sounded dirty, not my intention, but you know what I mean. And for him to come into a young Magic team on a much lesser compensation level, that was the word I was looking for, that'd be such a great get. I don't know what he's going to get in the open market, especially because of his injury history. If they can get him for virtually nothing, sign him the F up, because at least you have a stopgap for a while, or at least until he goes down with an injury. I don't hate that acquisition at all if they go get him.
I'm gonna be curious to see what he gets to, and whether the Wizards might decide to like use his bird rights to keep him. But I don't like. We're talking about this right now. The cap landscape is such that who's coming in with a non-taxpayer mid-level for Malcolm Brogdon? Is he going to end up being like a mini MLE type guy for all we know at this point? It's probably possible.
I wouldn't rule that out. No.
If you're going to go after shooting, again, I'm aware for anyone, like I know that Malik Beasley and Duncan Robinson aren't point guards, but if you want dudes who can come in and just kind of flame throw from beyond the arc, I wouldn't hate Chris Paul here, though. Let's just like De'Aaron Fox and Steph Castle are in San Antonio. Chris Paul wants to be on a contender. He shot the three ball. Like the volume on his threes was great this year, and he can still set up plays. Getting into the teeth of defenses, he's not going to cook guys off mismatches. That's tough. But he would certainly come in and be able to organize things, I think, without infringing upon like the functional existences of Paolo or Franz.
If there's a guard out there that doesn't need to get into the teeth of the defense to break guys down and still be able to deliver passes, it's still Chris freaking Paul. So, that
it is not Mikal Bridges, despite how he plays, just in case anyone's wondering.
So, he would be interesting. Is he interested in leaving San Antonio? It's like again, I'm not trying to say I have sources on this because I have no idea, but it felt like to me that he was, when I spoke with him, that he was just so in tune with the Spurs. He loved it there. Again, that could be PR fodder. That could be him just saying the right thing. I have no idea, but it did seem like he genuinely enjoys the Spurs experience. Does he want to hang on to like after what they've done, like or aligned them to this season or this summer rather? We don't know. He'd be a great get. You have Duncan Robinson on the list, which I think is interesting. Like just basically as a straight on off ball guy. Is that your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, he does some stuff inside the arc now. The Magic just don't have the
Yeah.
spacing to actualize it. But they need, and I guess Jet Howard support, but like they don't have that guy that can just come in and get shots up, like flying around screens or get them up in volume. And if Duncan Robinson's decline, like exercising his ETO, I'm assuming he's taking a pay cut just over like a longer period of time. Now, and I think the Magic's like half court offense, some of the stuff we saw like away from the ball for them when they were closer to full strength makes me believe that they would figure out how to utilize him. But he's still, even more so than Malik Beasley, like you need someone to set him up. And while you do have Paolo and Franz, the entire point of this exercise was kind of to figure out, well, how do we upgrade like that spot? And
Right.
Duncan Robinson or Malik Beasley or Norman Powell, to circle back to that, that feels like the move after you make the caps lock move.
See, now I'd be in on Norman Powell after you make the caps lock move. That's the thing. I think that's a good way to phrase it. Like you have your priorities in place, right? If you do get that guy who can go in and handle the offense a great deal, then that's when you go out and find like the guys who benefit from that. And in that case, Norman Powell would be extremely high on my list.
What do you think of, like, if you were them, would you consider taking a flyer on someone who's more unproven? Or like let's just say there's a mega trade happening. Reed Shepard's being traded, but the Magic have the ability to go in and like acquire him as part of that. Or are you looking for a more I think I love Reed Shepard, but just I think I need a more bankable option here for that. I think he's going to be really good, and they could certainly insulate like all of his defensive struggles, and I think he still might be fine on that end of the floor long term anyway. I guess maybe I also don't trust like the coach. Like, are they going to give him enough minutes? Like they gave Tristan Da Silva a ton of minutes out of the gate because they had to, and also because he's someone who can theoretically defend. They've seemed to like hold back on other dudes that can't theoretically defend or might
Right.
struggle on that end. But I like my roundabout way of asking, does it have to be more of just like a veteran, or would you consider rolling the dice on like maybe a not a reclamation project or necessarily a second draft, but even someone
Right.
not young, but like Ty Jerome is super unproven when we're looking at this, but he would be a somewhat intriguing fit here too.
Yeah, what you're asking me is would I roll the dice on someone who isn't as established as a lot of guys? Yeah, look, I mean, again, it depends on the player and it depends on how I feel about that guy. We
Oh
have
no,
to
I meant
remember
as the move though. Not as
as
like
the
this is the only
move.
move we're ever going to make, but it's because you could look at Ty Jerome and say, well, or let's say you could just look at plugging a youngster in there and say, well, if we
Mhm.
got a veteran in who could play in front of him or something, but as just like the solution, like they're coming in and saying Ty Jerome is our starting
Okay.
one or Reed is
Okay.
our starting one.
That's tough, right? I mean, again, you would have to go back to the draft boards and figure out like how high were we on this guy during
Mhm.
draft time? Like how did we feel about him? What were our internal projections for him? You know, do we think under this in this system he can thrive? Like you have to ask yourself a million questions. But if everything is coming up Millhouse, why not? Why not try to go about it? I mean, look, Reed Shepard, I think that might not be a bad move. That could be one of those things where it could look like a freaking steal a couple years from now. Now, he's small though, very small. It's not just the height; it's like the stature. He's not a big guy, and it seems like Orlando has prioritized like size,
Mhm.
positional size. So for him, that would almost go against the grain of what they're used to. But that also is kind of interesting. Like if they're open minded enough to saying, all right, you know what, we need to get a guy in who doesn't necessarily fit our understanding of the archetype that we always want. Um, I wouldn't hate it. I'd probably, if I'm a Magic fan, I'd probably look at it and go, is that all we did?
I'd have
Is
questions. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What exactly happened? Like, is everything we got is that like a guy with a stash who averaged like what 4 points per game this year. I don't even know what he averaged. I don't remember.
I will say if they did do that though, I would instantly with him and Paolo on the same team and Jalen Suggs, I'd instantly just become an Orlando Magic fan.
Yeah. I had a feeling you would. Yep.
Well, you know a name I didn't bring up? I don't know how available he is because he actually seems more important when you now look at the
plays in Europe. Stop pitching Frank Ntilikina, okay?
All right. Well, my next name on the list is, and his team makeup, I think right now is set up that they need him more than they did at the start of this season, weirdly. Emmanuel Quickly, kind of another big money name, but he's in the realm of Jalen Suggs. He's not costing you a max. That's not a max guy.
I'm still blown away by all the pushback he got this year, or just the criticisms. Like, he wasn't healthy. I don't.
He's never had like real practice time with this team anymore. Like
Correct.
he came, like they talk. There's a lot of people talking about defensive regression, and there was. But you mentioned the injury. I also think like familiarity is a part of that, and the Raptors play such an aggressive style that you give Emmanuel Quickly a healthy training camp. I think he would fit. I'm not saying he deserved to be Defensive Player of the Year, all defense at any point, but now it feels like we've veered towards too far of the negative. We can never just exist in the happy medium space. Everything has to be absolute, apparently.
Yeah, I look, a guy who's in and out of the lineup all year, and it wasn't like, oh, he missed a chunk here, and that was it. Then he came back and played every game like consecutively. No, it was in and out of the lineup constantly. That is so much harder than if it's just one long injury. And it's still like I'm just gonna say, I know raw stats is not the way to go, but 17 points per game in 27 minutes, almost 6 assists, 3.5 boards. He's always been a tremendous rebounder. He got up almost 7 triples per game in those 27, well, almost 28 minutes, and 4 free throws. Like, the guy's just productive. And I understand that in today's NBA sphere of analysis and opinions, everyone wants the, oh, look at that wing who averages 4 points per game, but the wingspan, oh my God, he can defend 4 levels. Yep, that's cool. But you also need guys who can just flat out produce. Come on. Like, at some point.
So Paul George, you think there's a Paul George team?
Oh my God, you had to go there. You had to go there. No, but like, Emmanuel Quickly can freaking produce. Like, he's shown that. You sometimes, I think even Zach Lowe said this a couple weeks ago. At some point, you just got to put up stats. I think he was talking about Dalen Terry or something. Like, basically, like, yeah, they look fine, but like, they had like 1 rebound or 2 assists or something, and that was it. And at some point, you just got to do something. Emmanuel Quickly does something. He does something all the time. And yeah, will there be areas where he's not perfect? Absolutely. But for Orlando specifically, fuck yes, I'm in. I just don't consider him available. That's why I didn't even think about him.
Yeah, I don't even, like, if Toronto even won the lottery, I think you could even then argue that Emmanuel Quickly becomes more important to that roster because of everything he does off the ball.
Yeah. It's a good shout on him, by the way. That's a good name because he's actually, like, for what we're talking about in terms of the archetype, he's pretty close to it, actually.
He's actually, I think of all the names that we mentioned, and if you're looking for someone who has a track record, does he come the closest to just kind of checking all of the boxes in the most significant fashion? Probably. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Like, not too expensive, but not so cheap that you're just not going to play him. And then, okay, he's not your A+ playmaker, but he can do some live dribble things. Yeah, I would like that. But I don't know, the Magic do, without putting Franz or Suggs on the table, like, they don't quite have choose your own adventure trade assets, but like, all things are possible if you're going to put enough on the table. And like, they have the ability to like throw some flyers and draft picks on the table. And maybe something happens with Toronto over the offseason that sort of changes the calculus of where they're headed. But I would agree with you that I don't think Emmanuel Quickly is unavailable, but he's not one of those guys that are untouchable either.
Right. I mean, look, Orlando, Toronto absolutely has needs. They need more small forwards, obviously, because that's just the way they're building their teams apparently now. They need to start 5 small forwards. I think they have 3 out of 4 or 3 out of 5 at this point. So yeah, what can Orlando give them there? KCP, he's a 3 now, right? He's not quick enough to be a 2. There we go. KCP for Emmanuel Quickly. Get everything you need, Toronto. Just wings. Just wings. Wings for days.
You just angered an entire nation. Congratulations. You got anything else on the Magic, or are you ready to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the work that you do?
Well, I think we're good. I mean, it's the Magic. How much can you really talk about them at this stage?
We told them for 45+ minutes, and I really do believe that the Magic are like a giant hiding in plain sight, but the problem is that like even their own front office apparently can't see it,
Right.
and like that's the real that's the real issue here.
My one of my Danish podcast partners, he's basically saying he said for a while, I don't think Orlando as an organization should exist. And it's like I every time I talk about Orlando, I get him in the back of my mind, and he's kind of evolved it as time goes on. Like first it was the organization, now it's the city of Orlando should not exist. I'm just waiting for him to branch into Florida. Like I actually do think there's a lot of excitement going on around this team. I find them pretty exciting myself, as long as they don't go into these droughts or these slogfests where it's like, oh, we're gonna average 81 over the next 3 games. Like, no.
Yeah, they're out of it. We didn't talk about this nearly enough. Like they're out of excuses. There's no more waiting on like maybe this guy pops and like the offense. No, there's just I know you had injuries, but like we now have you've lost in the playoffs 2 years in a row, exactly how everyone expected you to. I agree. It was the Celtics. You put them through hell defensively, but like your offense is just
so bad,
constantly operating in the muck, and there's no more excuses. And I don't necessarily think it's the problem of any one player on the roster. It's just that this collection of talent very clearly needs 1 or 2 very specific types of other talents to be optimized.
Right. You know what's going to be interesting? It's going to be in 3 years, because that is the length that they gave Vooch, Aaron Gordon, and Evan Fournier. They gave them 6 seasons together to see if something magical would happen. It didn't, obviously. It just ended on a dud. But I think that, like, I will give them this. To give a core that many years together to see if they can figure it out shows patience. That is something that a lot of teams could learn from, because they're like too quick on the trigger to get out of a situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how Orlando both stays the course with the current nucleus and how they add to it.
Mort, tell everyone where they can find you and all your work, please.
Yeah, you can find me over at Blue Sky at MSJ NBA, where I share links from Yahoo, from Forbes, and from the Danish podcast, and of course the one in English that you're listening to right now as well. Yes.
But you do not share links to the NBA podcast. What is that about?
You know what? That is because you are quicker than me. It's the same file, so I just repost you.
Sometimes you publish before I do, though, so that's also on you.
I know. Look, if you really I'm actually lying to everyone, because I always forget to go in and attach my links to Forbes, for example, and I even think I'm like behind on 3 articles over at Yahoo. So I have to do a lot better of just pimping my work. I'm just too busy doing a lot of stuff. I'm too busy working and podcasting with you. That's the thing.
Doing what, though? You're not watching basketball, clearly, with some of these takes.
Oh, okay, Mr. Paul.
Norm Powell can't shoot. What was that? Whatever he said on this.
I didn't say that. I know. Oh man. All right.
Okay, until next time, and as always, we leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the one player who actually can fix Orlando Magic's problems across the board, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.